Hello everybody, in today's video we are going to be getting a little bit technical because we're going to be talking about camera kit. I always get very excited talking about this kind of stuff because it's a little bit of the old me coming through, and also I am just a massive gearhead. I love playing with all this sort of stuff. But I'm asked about it often enough, I thought it would be worth dedicating an entire video to some of the basics, the principles, some of the common misconceptions, and just a few things you might want to know if you're considering starting out on your own YouTube journey. Now, to bring you this video, I have partnered with the wonderful people at Skillshare because Skillshare is an amazing website if you are currently trying to learn. And it's not just for people trying to learn camera stuff. You can learn everything from gardening to Google Analytics on there. It's an enormous library filled with virtual classes on pretty much anything you can think of. Now, each month I have picked out one class that I think is particularly relevant. And this month's is from a man called Simon Cade, and he's created a class called Filmmaking on a Budget, Tips for Achieving a Cinematic Look, in which he breaks down some of the key concepts you really need to know and understand if you want to be able to produce the highest quality videos. It's about an hour long or so, this class, and he's got a lot of different things about aperture, ISO, white balance, stabilization, framing, focal length, all that kind of stuff. And if those are terms that don't really mean anything to you, but you want to make nice pictures, well, go and watch his class. Join up on Skillshare. The best bit of it all is that the first 1,000 people to do so using my link in the description down below will be able to get themselves a free premium trial. And then if you like what you find, it's only less than $10 a month using an annual subscription. Then that will get you access to the entire world that Skillshare has to offer. So a big thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. So the first, biggest and most important question to really answer. Do you need an expensive camera to make videos on YouTube? Simply put, no. If you have an expensive camera, can you make better videos on YouTube? Maybe. Do you really need a better camera? That's a question that only you can answer. And here's the thing that I would say. If you're just starting out, chances are you probably already have a decent camera because you may own a mobile phone. Any mobile made in the last sort of 3 or 4 years will be perfectly capable of making reasonable quality video. Audio, however, is a different matter, and that's something that is greatly misunderstood and indeed overlooked. But you have to remember, most people watching your content are probably doing so on a small little tablet, a display, a mobile phone, something like that, that probably doesn't have great sound quality. We would love to think, all of us creators, that everyone who watches our videos does so in a big lounge with a 5.1 Dolby Surround THX certified system, and that's just not the case. We're lucky if somebody listens to our stuff using headphones. That'd be great. But the truth is, sound quality is often overlooked in favor of visual. And actually, sound quality, and this pains me, but as a former cameraman, it's very true, is much more important. If you couldn't hear what I was saying, you'd probably turn off this video really very quickly. So making sure that your sound is clear is very important. So how do you go about getting good sound? Well, the way that I do it is with a little Sennheiser microphone. Now, I can't show you the other half of it because it's currently attached to my camera, but it's very compact, nice, neat. It's called the AVX ME2. Now, unfortunately, this is quite expensive. This is about 600 or 700 quid. It's not actually perfect. In fact, in terms of sound quality, it's not actually as good as the old kit that I used to use, which looks a little bit like this. Now, it looks pretty much the same, doesn't it? And indeed, it pretty much does the same job. This is a second generation Sennheiser professional wireless pack. So this is the transmitter. Okay, so this is the one that you would actually wear on you, and then you have a matching receiver that looks pretty much the same, and that's the one that goes on top of the camera and receives. The sound quality on these, I believe, is much better than on this. The downside, however, is that because this is professional equipment, this is also a little bit older, it is possible for it to go a little bit wrong. You can get some interference on this, depending on the frequency that you're using, if there's stuff around. You also need to be very careful, by the way, if you are taking wireless kit abroad, especially, say, outside the EU, or if you're living in America, if you take it outside America, be careful, because you might actually be taking an illegal piece of transmission equipment. So different frequencies are reserved in different places for transmission, so be careful. I actually once took a wireless kit over to America, and although it was legal to use over there, the frequency that it used was actually one that was pretty populated. So actually it turned out that my video was total garbage because all I got was static. So there are lots of other cheaper setups you can use. Rode is a company that tends to make reasonable quality stuff. I think the quality of some of their products have gone downhill a little bit recently, but if you want something that's pretty good and at a relatively affordable price, Rode stuff is often worth looking at. I do use a Rode product, which is this. So this is the little Rode, I believe it's the Stereo Video Mic Pro. There you go. And this is what I use when I'm doing the drive-by shots of the cars. Now, I used to, on occasion, just use the camera's built-in mic. I've had different versions of these for different things. And this is pretty good, as the name implies. It records in stereo, which is handy for your imaging. You can get sort of mono versions of these, sort of more shotgun-orientated ones, so they're sort of a longer microphone, a bit more sort of a pointed field of view, I want to say. That's not actually how it works, but it sort of is. Anyway, don't worry about that. This is very handy for recording drive-bys, because if you just use the camera's built-in microphone, as I've had before, the camera's built-in microphone is just on the top of the camera. And so that means if you're standing there, what it actually records is your breath. So I've had a few drive-bys where all you can hear is not the car, it's just me going, usually because I just wind up running up a hill or something to try and get the shot, and so that's not really very elegant or sexy. So that is kind of where this comes in. You'll notice it has a big furry covering on it, as do some of my little... so I've got loads of spare microphones because they break. So the little microphones, such as the one that I'm wearing now, this is a Sennheiser lavalier or lapel microphone. They're about 95 quid each for just the mic itself, not the transmitter and receiver and all that gubbins. If you want to get one of these older things, you can probably pick one of these up for sort of £200-300 online and buy spares of all the cables, all the microphone, everything. Buy spares, because they do break, especially when I've seen people like wrap them around their hands and do all sorts of horrible stuff, and if you don't look after this kit, it won't last. If you do look after it, it'll go quite a while. My first Rode wireless microphone, which I think at the time they just called it the Rode Wireless, that lasted about 2 years. That worked really, really well until it stopped working really well, and it nearly ruined a couple of shoots, including some really important ones. So do where you can. If you've got someone else filming your stuff, get them to wear headphones so they're listening to the audio as it's coming through, and make sure that it's all being recorded in sort of decent, high quality. So that's just a tiny little bit on sound. And also some of the basics, so if you are going outside and it's windy, get a little covering for your microphones. Don't try and use these to record dialogue, because these are generally useless. These are much better. Also, it means that whether I'm right in front of the camera or I'm sort of standing, 20 feet away, the sound quality is going to be consistent. So it's just going to make life a lot easier. If you've got more than one person to record, that's where things get a little bit tricky, and honestly, that's a whole other topic. But let's talk cameras, shall we? Now, you can do a lot with a mobile phone. There's a huge amount of stuff that you can get done with them, but they do have some limitations. Battery life is one. If you start recording with a mobile phone, you are going to chew through batteries, and most of them don't have a battery you can easily charge or replace or whatever. You're probably going to be using your mobile phone for other stuff as well, and it's just a little bit impractical. People tend to drop their phones all the time. They don't always have masses of storage on them, but it does work. My friend Laurie at Laurie's Mechanical Marvels, he and his team have all got the same Google phone that they use. So it just works, and it does very well for them. They produce some high quality content with it. Now, my stuff, I don't really use mobile phones other than for the odd little sort of pickup shot where I've suddenly realised I've forgotten something and I've got my phone to hand, and I just get a shot, and that's that done. What I use is a combination of different things, and I've got a new piece of kit as well that I want to talk to you about, because that's been sent out to me, and I've now been evaluating it along with a couple of my friends for about 3 weeks. So this is a 360 cam. I'm going to get onto that in a minute and talk about how it works, how it doesn't work, and whether it could be something that you might want to buy if you're starting out on YouTube. So I have my main camera. For a very long time, this was a Sony a7S Mark II. This then was a Panasonic GH5, which is actually what I'm recording on right now. And then I upgraded to a Panasonic S5. So it's fairly chunky things. This has got a big lens on it. It's a Lumix S Pro 2470. This whole thing in my hand, this is about $4 grand. So it's not cheap. And it's rubbish. I mean, legitimately, it's atrocious. The lens, this bit, this is fabulous. I love this. This is great. This bit, it's dog dirt. Absolutely awful. If you are a videographer, do not buy a Lumix S5. Worst camera I've ever owned. A lot more expensive than the GH5 that I'm recording on now. Nowhere near as good. There's a few little things that it does better, really minor stuff, but honestly, this is tragic. It's going to be sold soon and replaced with something else, which I'm dreading because it's probably going to be even more money because it's a thing I kind of want to make sure I upgrade. And so to get something better than this, that hopefully will then do the job I need it to, you're looking at about £4,000. So a GH5 is a great buy. The older GH4, I think people quite like those as well. Never really used one, so I couldn't comment too much. The little Canon M50, that's a very popular camera. People love their mirrorless cameras. Some people confuse SLR and mirrorless. Very easy to tell. This is a mirrorless. So there is no mirror in here. If you open this up and you can see the sensor like you can here, then it's a mirrorless. If you open it up and there's a little mirror there at a sort of 45-degree angle, then it is an SLR. Might be something else, but it's probably an SLR. So what is it that you're looking for in a camera? Well, this is where it gets a little bit complex. This is where you need to know your fundamentals. This is where doing your Skillshare class will really help you out. For me, what I want is manual control for when I need it, automatic control for when I don't want it, a nice, bright, clear screen that I can see easily in daylight in mixed conditions, a family of lenses that I can use that do all the things I need to. This is one area where the S5 fails. I need a screen that can then sort of flip out so I can see if I'm doing what I am now. I've got the screen kind of over here. I can see very clearly what's going on. Nothing's really sort of, worrying. I know exactly what I'm doing. My old Sony, the A7S II, that was one of the flaws with that, is that I just couldn't see what was going on. Just had no idea. You had to set up a shot and hope that it was doing the focus and everything correctly, and occasionally it wouldn't. So that is a bit of an issue. You want to be able to have a decent amount of recording modes, different codecs, different quality, that sort of stuff. I record everything in 4K or UHD. There is a difference between the two. They're not the same. Don't confuse them. So everything's uploaded and rendered in 4K, which I really, really like. It's actually UHD. Let's call it UHD because that's what it's properly called. So that tries to give me a reasonable amount of quality. And I didn't start off that way. My A camera was always recording in UHD, but my action cams didn't. So I started off with sort of a mix of UHD and HD, and then I upgraded the kit as I went along. The truth is, when it comes to cameras, what you want to do is get whatever camera you can get your hands on, whatever it is that you can afford, just use it. Just start doing stuff with it, and you'll learn quickly whether you're the limitation or it is. If there's things that you really need to be able to do and it can't, then you need to upgrade to a camera that's got these other features. Make sure that you can plug in a microphone, that you can mount one easily. Some smaller cameras, that's not always a given. And make sure you can get plenty of batteries for it. Make sure it takes a memory card that you can use, that you can get easily and cheaply enough. You do occasionally bump into odd formats. Most cameras pretty universal on that front. But just take time. Go out and spend a lot of time taking as much footage as you possibly can, and then you'll just get on from there. The best lesson you can get, really, once you understand the theory of it, is simply just to start making stuff. Now, when it comes to mounting cameras on the car, I have done a video on this previously, so I don't want to go over it in too much detail, but there's a few key points. Now, I use a little fleet of these, little Sony action cams. They have had a very hard life. Some of these have been around now for about 3 or 4 years. Some of them have been upgraded with different lenses. So this one has got a lens from a company called Rage Cams. This gives a much narrower field of view than, say, this, which has still got its original lens on. You can see the difference. That's the original lens, and that's the Rage Cams one. So this has like half the field of view. Means getting different shots is much easier because I don't always want super wide angle. That's one of the things I don't like about these kind of cameras. So, if you're going to mount these, and a lot of people ask why I don't use GoPros. I like GoPros. The new GoPro 9, it's incredible. It's very versatile. It's got a little screen on it, and I'd say maybe from a sort of beginner's perspective, actually the GoPro's a bit better because you are going to know what you're going to get. This, as you can see, doesn't really have any screen on it. You've got this basic display on the side, but it's not the same. You can get a little remote for them, but it's a pain, and if you're using multiple of these, it's just useless. I tend to run most of these outside of their casings. You get them with a little waterproof housing, which looks like this. And one of the things I like about these over a GoPro is it has just an industry standard screw thread in the bottom, which is fantastic. That means that I can mount it properly, and that's the important bit. So let me show you a couple of different types of mounts. This is a Delkin Fat Gecko, or the Twin Fat Gecko, or the Fat Gecko Duo, or whatever they call it. This is okay. This is not great. I don't massively trust it. This is not the best kind of mount, but this can go in places where other cameras wouldn't. I would not ever trust a single one of these. I've used this for long enough, and I just don't have faith in it. I know other people have got on with them perfectly well, and they've had a good time with it. That's fine, good for them. But I just don't trust it. The Duo, and you can get a 3 sort of suction cup one as well. They're okay. This is reasonably good. Just keep an eye on it. And whenever you're mounting a car on a camera, especially if it's outside the car, make sure this is nice and solidly mounted. Give it a good firm tug, because if you can lift it off, if it'll come off in your hand, it was definitely going to come off when you're driving. So you want to be absolutely sure, because if a camera falls off a car while you're out driving, you could be in some serious trouble. So the mounts that I prefer, instead of these, are ones like this. This is a little Manfrotto mount. I get it from a website called Hague, also known as cameragrip.co.uk, and these are pretty solid. These things are very, very good, very simple. So camera screws into this bit here, nice and easy. So you just da-da-da-da-da. That's in. You kind of get it where you want on the car. You do that, and there should be some resistance. If you've got resistance when you're doing that, that means it's working, and then that should be sort of pretty much welded down. If you're a little bit unsure about mounting this to a car, and some cars are really easy. Lamborghini, all flat panels, dead easy. Mazda RX-7, all curvy panels, not so easy. Mount to glass. If you're unsure, you're starting out, mount to glass, because that's going to be the best surface. It's nice and flat. Make sure it's clean, make sure it's not wet. Dry it off. Some detailing spray and some cloths are a part of my camera kit, so for a good reason. So these will get you nice, decent, high quality footage. This one I've modified with a little fluffy bit here. This is what I use for exhaust noise. If ever you see a shot of an exhaust, it's this camera that's got it. In the last like 3-4 years, it's this camera that's done it. This camera even got damaged at one point, and it now only focuses fairly close, which is fine, because for exhausts, they're always quite close. So it's accidentally become a little bit more useful. There are other mounts that I have too. So if you're going to be working on, say, a Caterham, an aerial, something like that, of course, a suction mount isn't going to really do you any good. In which case, you have a variety of, say, clamp mounts. This is a K-clamp, or something's called a magic clamp, because you get magic arms. Made by a company called Manfrotto. This is like an industry standard piece of filmmaking equipment. Any filmmaking set, there'll be like a box of these kicking around. If there's not, they're amateurs. Then the camera that goes in the car, so the big camera, that gets mounted with this, which, as you can tell, is much bigger. This is 120mm diameter versus the 90mm of the smaller ones, because I just don't trust suction mounts. So you can pump it up here, and you get a nice, good, firm hold. This thing, once this is attached, this is not coming off by accident. So they're decent solid mounts, and these are not horrifically expensive. This one's, I think, like 80-90 quid or something. The smaller ones are like 40 to 50 pounds, depending on exactly which mount you get with it, that kind of jazz. So there's lots and lots of different ways you can mount up a car. I have just had my little green bag that you've probably seen in loads of videos, and it's full of all sorts of useful stuff, so that I can make sure I can always get the shot. But I have recently been sent a very new and interesting piece of kit from a company called Insta360, and not really any surprise what it does, because the company's name fairly gives it away. This is the Insta360 1X2. It's a 360-degree camera, so you can tell there are 2 lenses on it. So this thing, you can mount it up, and again, it's got a nice industry standard little screw thread here that I like. You mount it up, and it will create for you a 360-degree video. Now, I've used this for a little bit on a couple of shoots. I loaned this to my friend Laurie, who's taken it on a couple of his shoots, because I wanted to get his opinion on it, because he does a very different type of filmmaking to me. And here are my thoughts. It's still very much, I think, a work in progress, but it's a fabulous piece of kit. First off, it's quite well made. It may be a Chinese company, and it's a Chinese product made in China, but the days of made in China being synonymous with poor quality seem to be long gone. Most of the stuff on here is fairly solid, and indeed, the thing itself in the hand feels very nicely made. The quality of footage out of it is not actually that bad either. And there's a few ways you can edit. You can do it using an iPad and some software like that. My friend Anthony did a whole video on that. He's much better at this thing than I am, honestly. They've got their own studio that you can use. You can then have a plug-in for Adobe Premiere Pro, which is the edit software that I use. And there's some really trick stuff that you can do with this. I was trying to rig this up so it could be like the passenger in the car, but it just didn't quite work. And here's one of the issues for me, is that I already have a fleet of half a dozen cameras, each getting different angles. So trying to add this into the mix, which then sees everything at the same time, just wound up not kind of working. It's also quite a time-consuming thing, both to set up and to edit. So if you have got the time and you're not making the sheer quantity of videos that I am, it's a very good little thing to look into. It's not particularly cheap, but it's not extortionately expensive either. You're looking at about £500 to £600 to get yourself kind of all the kit you really need to make this work. Unfortunately, the one thing they don't really have many of at the moment is spare batteries, and that's one issue for me. The battery is actually very good. It's a good size. It lasts quite a while, so you get well over an hour out of this thing, and an hour is kind of my benchmark. I need all my cameras to be able to last at least an hour. These last sort of 40 to 50 minutes. It's one of my criticisms of them. HD cameras, you'll find last a lot longer than the 4K ones, just because of the amount of processing and stuff involved. This is very app driven. I'm not so keen on that. So you do have a little screen on it. So this thing here will turn into a screen, and you have got some basic functions that you can kind of operate. You can look around, you can see what it can see, all that sort of jazz. But there's a lot that you can only really set from your phone. And I don't like that. I don't like anything where you can only do stuff from your phone. In fact, the first time you turn this on, you need to activate it, and that's rather irksome. I don't like having to then get my phone out, download a very large app to even be able to actually start the thing rolling. That's just frustrating. I had some issues with this also, sort of just stopping recording and then starting again randomly. So I couldn't really get it to do that again, but it during one shoot, it kept beeping every sort of few minutes as it was creating a new file, and that was very distracting. So yeah, that was a sort of negative point for it. Sound quality is also very poor. There's no two ways about it. It's built-in microphone, or you can actually sort of get a microphone into it. I can't remember how you even do that, but you can do it, feed it an external source. And even if you do that, sound quality is substandard. So you're going to need some form of external audio recorder. Maybe be a small thing like a little Tascam recorder, something like that. But you're going to need that. If you want to rely on this as your kind of primary camera, you will need that. But there are cool things you can do with this that you can't do with basically any other camera because of what it is. So my buddy Anthony has loaned me some of his amazing shots. So you can do stuff like this. Also, my friend Laurie sent me over this, and here's some of the stuff he's been up to with it. So if you want to do ride-alongs, that type of stuff, it's amazing. Also, if you are starting out and you don't have all these other cameras, what you can get with this is essentially multiple cameras in one. So you can just set this up in a car, and if you've got, say 2 of you in the car, you're doing a more vloggy type piece, as long as you've got sound catered for, because don't trust this, then you can, from the same video file, you can get a footage of the driver, you can get footage of the passenger, you can get footage of them both together, and you can get footage of the front of the car, and you can even do clever shots sort of moving between all of those. Now, your ultimate picture quality, of course, is not going to be as good as it will be from any one of these single cameras, but for most stuff, again, people watching on a mobile phone, actually it's going to be fine, and the ability to do that is incredible. So if you have the patience and time to set one of these up properly, and then again in the edit, you can get some amazing results. And truthfully, it's in the edit where I don't really have the time for this. I just don't have the patience to set everything up, get the shots with it and all that jazz, and I don't personally think it adds anything to my videos. But you can also, so they did send some accessories for me with it. This tripod, this is really good. Like really, really good. So this is a nice thing. It's nicely made. It's versatile. Like you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. Like this is a cool piece of kit. I really like it. It's dead simple. It's nothing fancy, but it's very, very handy. You've also got an extraordinarily long selfie stick. I mean, this thing is massive. You can get some really funky shots, and you can even, in theory, mount this to the back of a car and get some wild stuff with it. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to do that. So for me, the 360 cam was a cool idea, but it doesn't work. However, for somebody starting out anew, there are things you can do with this that you just can't with anything else that I have. And for the size of it and the price of it, I think it's worth looking into. I think it's much more useful than, say, having a drone. And please, don't get me started on drones. So, yeah. So there's just a little brief look at some of the camera kit that I have. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't mentioned. Filters, you know, NDs, got polarizers. You want memory cards, you need spare batteries. There's days worth of stuff you could discuss about all of this. But I just wanted to show you a little bit of the kit that I use, some of my thoughts on it, because some of it may surprise you, and yeah, that was kind of it, really. So, and also talk to you about this clever little piece of kit. So I want to thank Insta360 for sending it out to me. They sent this to me with all of the accessories for purpose of review. They haven't paid for anything or anything like that. Incidentally, you get a lens cover with it, which is very handy, and you get lens guards, which unfortunately I do have to give a negative point to. They are entirely useless because the camera sees them. So those chuck straight in the bin. The rest of it, quite a nice piece of kit, just not for me. So, there we have it. There's a little bit about camera stuff and geekery. Hope you've enjoyed a slightly different video from me. See you for the next one. Bye-bye.